If you're new in town or just new to this whole podcast thing, you're tuning in to Law by Night, the podcast that discusses all things vampiric with no fear of breaching the Masquerade. In this episode, we shall be discussing Lilith, the woman argued to be the mother of demons in the world of darkness. We shall discuss our origins, motives, and the cultures of those who dubbed the pronoun of Bahari. Over and over I hear two sounds, near whispers, silent and sibilant, like the crack of a serpent's tongue. Lilith, the screech owl voice shrieking in the twilight, crouched over the edge of sanity, stealing the breath of babes and whisking away the dreamer's seed. The touch of every shame, the glinting teeth of a lover none will admit but all desire. The Dark Mother, who will rise to usher in the end of the world. Chilling, isn't it? These few opening sentences come from the revelations of the Dark Mother, a collection of oral lore from the various Baham, members of the Bahari cult that worship Lilith, the Dark Mother. Some Baham are vampires, believing that Lilith taught Cain the secrets of disciplines, which you'd remember from our previous conversation regarding Cain and Nodism. I called the Baham vampires then, for they do not use kindred or Cainite, for they forgo the legacy of Cain entirely. Vampiric Baham use Laka or blood Bahari instead. Other Bahari are mortals or awakened mages, but that is a conversation for another time, for I've brought you here again tonight to present and complete the origin story of our kind, in the hope for you to have a wider appreciation of what we are and the true nature of our damnation, should you wish to call it that. You look puzzled. Yes, I am giving you the choice to leave this time. Many kindred do not acknowledge Lilith as an entity that exists, even less so than Cain. A couple reasons for this are immediately obvious, but the roots of this negligence runs much, much deeper. What I'm about to discuss for you is disturbing, far more so than most of our previous topics. The destruction of what we treasure and love, humiliation, misogyny, sadism, masochism, and rape run rampant in the veins of all Bahari, including the Dark Mother herself. Our version of events do not shine a terribly positive light on Christianity, but then again, they are very good at doing that themselves in practically everything in their Bibles, including the neglecting of Lilith. But I digress. My point, child, is that, as per usual, I will make no efforts to sugarcoat anything for you, for this needs to be addressed. That being said, I will respect your need to approach these things another night. Now, as it would seem you have chosen to stay, let us begin with the origins of Lilith, according to what is written down in the Revelations of the Dark Mother. This tale begins at the very beginning, before life and matter as we know exist today. An entity known as the Ancient One would rest and not move, only to open its eyes once every 55,555 years to see what was there, only to snuff out everything out of existence by shutting them again the next 55,555 years. On the 333rd repetition of this, a bolt of lightning destroyed the darkness, creating Jehovah, who I will refer to as God for simplicity's sake. It also introduced the Shining Ones, the angels. They pleased the Ancient One with words of wisdom and song, weaving our world into being, growing their own gardens and populating them with life. God's garden was the greatest, probably because it contained the two great trees, the tree of life and the tree of knowledge of good and evil. From these trees bared fruits and seeds, which were granted to the angels. God too ate the seeds and fruit, more so than the angels. But what does this have to do with Lilith, I hear you ask? Well, God was not satisfied, having drunk and ate much as he could from his garden and waters. He would realize that he wanted more than just the company of the angels. He sought companionship. Sad and lonely, he wept onto the earth, which created two strange fruits, to quote the tome, which seemed to meet the approval of the Ancient One. These two fruits were the first humans, one male by the name of Ish and a female called Lilitu. You would recognize them by the names of Adam and Lilith, each gaining gifts from God. Adam would receive the gifts of shaping and naming, whilst Lilith got fertility and intuition. both appreciated the workings of God, which pleased him greatly. God would command his angels to encourage his latest creations, the joys of the garden, and to use their gifts. Adam went round naming the plants and animals, learning how to hunt as they did, whilst it was Lilith's role to breed and tend to their needs, fertilizing the plants also. She was not allowed to eat the fruits of the tree of knowledge, as made forbidden by God, claiming that it would rip her apart from the inside. Whilst Lilith did not believe him, she did not challenge the idea, despite her desires to pluck the fruit of the trees and eat them. She would, however, eat the fruit that would fall off the trees, awakening and elevating her to the same knowledge and power of Jehovah. Now on his level, so to speak, she watched and waited to understand how to be like him. She tried teaching Adam, but he was only interested in hunting and shagging the animals, which I will address shortly. So Lilith created her own weapons, commanding predators to follow her, exceeding the prowess of Adam. Adam would decide that he wanted a mate, for there was only so much the coitus with beasts could provide him. Lilith told him he was above this and should not sleep with them, which is arguably some sane advice now that you think about it. Anyway, Adam told her to lie down with him, to partake in sex with him. She was repulsed, as anyone who would be knowing your brother was into bestiality. But it wasn't just that. She was equal to God and didn't have to listen to him. She had free will and did not have to do as he said. The animalistic sibling was furious by this rejection, violently forcing himself onto her, causing her to bleed as he raped her. She would fight back, causing him to bleed also. It was of little use, for, to reference the tome, his seed had been laid, and he'd hoisted her to the heavens, gifted to God. He lacked the knowledge of what he did, for he really was no better than the animals he copulated with. No. It does not make it any better, but it certainly makes it considerably worse when you consider he had the opportunity to learn, and he chose otherwise. God was a bit irate, to say the least, with what happened. No, not with what Adam did, but with Lilith acquiring the knowledge that she did. He allowed Lilith to explain herself, to which he was satisfied with her answer, for she did exactly what he asked. He accepted her into heaven, where they spent 7 days and nights in each other's company, falling in love in the process. What shattered this was Lilith stating that she was God's equal. Jealous and angry, God banished her from heaven and the garden she cultivated, forcing her to wander the lands forevermore. For 7 days and 7 nights, Lilith traversed the hot and savage desert 7 times, causing horrendous damage to her now immortal frame. She did not repent or begged for forgiveness, neither did she deny that she was who she was or the seed that grew within her, to refer to the tome in such a manner. She would learn to sustain herself via the drinking of her own blood, to burrow into the earth and wait for nightfall. She would enhance her senses, learning of the endless seas far from these deserts. Lilith threw herself into the sea, swimming to the bottom and becoming as one of them, hunting them also. Amazed by the life she found, she encouraged them all to breed, becoming the mother of the sea in the process. It is said she did this by distributing the seed from within her. When she arose from the sea, her dark skin had turned to amber and her hair had become black as pitch. Her eyes were the surface of that sea, and they danced like the moon upon the waters. Despite her impressive work under the sea, she was not satisfied, for it paled in comparison to the gardens of Eden and the fruit that she craved for. God was fearful that she would return, certain that Lilith would ruin his creation. He would place Lucifer, sometimes known as Samael to Lilith, at the gates of Eden to prevent her from entering, not telling him of her prowess nor the love he had for her still. This plan did not work very well, however, for the two would meet and fall in love. Lucifer saw her for what she was, and knew she spoke the truth, as she told him the same when she told God. Lucifer, the light and darkness, offered Lilith a gift. It was the entire night sky, to which she wore as a cape, ruling it like he ruled the day. Truly amazed and inspired, she would leave Eden to create her very own garden, a garden that would only grow under the pale moonlight and the nourishment from her own blood, but it was of no use, for nothing grew. Lilith grew bitter and spiteful for the pride of God and how her tiling did not work as it once did. Her wrath obliterated the land, which she left in ruins as she returned to Eden. Upon her return, she requested that Lilith would let her pass, for she wished to learn how Jehovah made his trees of life and knowledge grew strong. he granted her access, casting her cloak of night over the trees. To hide from God, she took the form of a winged serpent. Lilith approached the tree of life, learning from its secrets of life and knowledge. It was by this tree that she met Isha, or Eve. Eve was created as a replacement of Lilith for Adam. According to the revelations of the Dark Mother, God did this by placing Adam into a deep slumber, removing a rib and sculpting that into a suitable mate, which Adam named Eve. It should be noted that Eve was created as a lesser creature by deliberate choice, a subservient thing, whose sole purpose was to submit to the wills and lusts of Adam, forever compliant and silent. When Eve was instructed to eat the fruit from the tree of knowledge by Lilith, she wept, for her mind's eye was now open to the horrors inflicted upon her. The two women of God remained in place, Lilith comforting Eve until Adam arrived, alarmed by the sound of his crying wife, who offered the fruit to Adam to learn why she cried. Filled with remorse and shame, he howled as a beast who would now be comforted by Eve. It would not take long for God to catch wind of what had transpired, and to say he was pissed would be a violent understatement. The garden was destroyed, his creations, the angels, and free humans cowered at the wrath of Jehovah, who would feel the wrath of the angels for allowing the garden and his creations to go to ruin. God would curse himself, locking himself away from the matter, essentially putting himself on an eternal naughty step. Adam and Eve were spared, whilst Lucifer and Lilith would depart, the former weeping as his immortal lover would travel in solitude once more. That is, until Cain would enter her life. Now, for the most part, the accounts of the encounter in the Revelations of the Dark Mother is fairly identical to what is written in the Book of Nod, but there are some differences, most notably the relationship between the two people. According to the Revelations of the Dark Mother, Lilith despised Cain, which is totally understandable knowing what we know of Cain. She knew he bore the scent of Adam and the touch of Eve. She sensed the dark aura he had around him, the gift of murder, a power that only Jehovah had possessed. The difference between that and Adam's ability to hunt is one of morals, something that Cain lacked entirely. But Lilith also pitied him, for she understood what it felt like to be cast out from God. She would care for him as a son in the garden of Lilith and Lucifer, feeding him her blood, teaching him the lessons of pain from his transgressions and violent new ones, something that many Bahari would soon learn, but more on that later, child. It was these teachings that Cain found the strength to deny the forgiveness of God via his angels. It also gave him the cockiness to defy Lilith, abandoning his post as a farmer in her garden. Following this, Lucifer and Lilith would tend to their garden of renewal and would bring 3 sons and 3 daughters to this world. The sons were named Kesep, Shotek, and Nesha, and the daughters were called Mem, Oreb, and Layla. Their existence gave seraphim and immortal solace and comfort in their land of Dahanyu. In fewer words, they found happiness. The land and all those that encompassed were fruitful, with Dahanyu rivaling Eden. That was until Cain and the antediluvians, the 3rd generation of vampires, destroyed the land and Lilith's children as a means of revenge for the pain and suffering he endured, for the many scars on his body inflicted by her and her many fawns. Lilith, incandescent with rage, would curse them all, except for Absimiliard and Arakel, the progenitors of the Nosferatu and Toreador bloodlines. They were the only ones who did not partake in the slaughter. And what did she curse them with? Death, by the blade of Lucifer, but not before inflicting eternal suffering onto them by her hand. Some Bahari priestesses and priests, who are referred to as Hierophants, would debate there was more suffering on Lilith's part. Some state that Lucifer and Lilith did not love each other at all, with the seraphim raping Lilith, who stole his magic from him as revenge. Some state that the other angels had their way with her as they did with her children, which mostly consist of demons such as succubi and incubi. Some speculate that Lilith and her demons are cursed, and with the uttering of the words, "Out Lilith," they are all powerless. But it does not matter, for the Lidens do not follow one canonical theory, but a series of contradictory texts and oral traditions passed down from one to another. What unifies them is that each Baham is born out of suffering. They consider him or herself one fruit of the Dark Mother's third and final garden, making it their duty to spread the seeds of enlightenment. They nurture crises around them, teaching them to learn from their pain, each with their own way of doing things. Most, if not all, employ physical torture, whilst enough of them adopt innuendos, cutting into them with small ideas of encouragement. Bahari have been known to gather in large violent orgies to test each other's limits, but this does not take the form of actual Lilith teaching, and these sorts of sadomasochistic practices are rather rare. In short, death and destruction has never been the goal, but it is something that they will not shy away from if circumstance permits it. Many Bahari actively seek out nodists, worshippers of Cain or God, to destroy them and their ignorant lies, whilst others make it their goal to re-educate them, especially vampiric Baham who follow the path of veils and thorns under the road of Lilith. Bahari do not work together either, by which I mean they are not a unified, organized sect. Most would congregate in small cults of 3 to 7 members in either a physical or digital space, growing their own gardens, both literal during the right seasons, and their own cults, or cutting out weeds, which probably doesn't need explaining to you, at least I hope it doesn't. Some of these cults act under one voice, whilst others adopt hierarchies. Similarly, Lilith worship is not bound to one religious ideology either. As my wording may have implied, the Bahari are not just a female-only feminist cult. Sex does not matter, only one's devotion to the Dark Mother. This being said, women outside of the Bahari are seen as less than cattle. No, hold on a moment, neonate. Before you begin to complain at me for being a misogynistic pig, I wish to remind you that mortal women are descendants of Eve, the third and lesser woman, created and to a lonely Adam that lacks Lilith's powers and intelligence and backbone and everything else that makes a Lilith fantastic. Anyway, to quote page 18 of the tome, although their allegiance to Lilith might make Bahari seem like natural feminists, the truth is far more complex. Female does not necessarily equal exalted. On the contrary, most women, in the Bahari view, are descendants of Eve, the third and most inferior woman. Created from a lonely Adam, lacking Lilith's original gifts and her divine gestation, these women really are the cheap cattle that misogynists scorn. Until and unless a woman consumes the mother's blood and takes her oath, that woman is an animal, worthwhile in her own way, certainly, but far below the Bahari. So the only thing a woman can do to change their standing is to become a Baham, to be initiated into the Bahari, which is a simple but painful process. First of all, they do not actively recruit members. A mentor would watch several potential students from a safe distance, marking them with a minor rite to add a tiny and barely noticeable coloration to their auras. Only those who have mastered all specs would notice this, and even less would know what it would even mean. From those who have been selected, then begins what was described to me as the Lon seduction, where the mentor would introduce themselves casually and drop hints here and there for a few years, perhaps setting small challenges for the initiate, to see if they are a valid choice. Should they meet the approval of the other Baham in the area, something that can take up to a year, thus begin the initiation proper, a ritualistic process that is centuries old. Once favoured with looks or wealth, they are thrust into a devastating metaphorical desert of pain, much like Lilith was. What I mean by this is what a sane or unenlightened person would refer to as torture. This continues until a dream or a vision of the Dark Mother or something related to her manifests itself. Until he or she has been thrown at the thorns at the gate, they cannot suckle at the sweet nectar within. Calm down, child. This whole process is often described to initiates as the torture garden or Lilith's garden. Until then, their access to the garden, the cult, is limited. Whilst pain is the initiation, agony is the stepping stone. Once the vision appears, the blood of Lilith is drunken by the initiate, and they must recite the Oath of Lilith and learn the secret symbolic language called the Bahara, which takes the forms of runes. You may be a Lilith worshipper without these requirements, but you are not a Bahari. It is a ritual, meaning participants wear scarlet robes inlaid with black briar patterns. Beyond this, casual yet stylish revealing clothings are worn, so others can see and show off the scars they are gained through the Dark Mother's teachings. Now you might be curious as to how a Laka, a vampiric Bahari, would survive following doctrines of enlightened torture and slaughtering of uninitiated individuals. Would this not degrade their humanity, turning them into whites or unempathetic psychopaths? Yes, neonate. Yes, it would. Whilst neonates and ancillae with seemingly high humanity are accepted, one does not have a mild curiosity for the true teachings of Lilith. You have to be a courageously intellectual individual with emotional vibrancy and a need far beyond lust to learn of her secrets. From this, it is easy to understand why most of its vampiric members are of Clan Toreador and whatever remains of the Lamia bloodline. A Hierophant, a Bahari priest, would become a torturous lover to the pupil, who would gain pain beyond mortal comprehension as they are pushed deep within Lilith's garden. And as a vampire, you also have the pains of the hungry beast to contend with, and are thus taught not to feed when immediately hungry, to endure as Lilith endured. Many are taught that they are not actually vampires in the traditional sense, but a manifestation of God's displeasure that bear an internal bloodlust. And, as said before, the question of morals in Bahari is but a skewered myth. Adam spurned Lilith, so the laws of his weak children, the mortals, should not be obeyed. Cain tormented Lilith, so his rules must be undone as well. Neonates can be diablerized and children can be beaten to an inch of their life before tearing them asunder. As long as it is rightfully performed in Lilith's name, it is relatively straightforward to argue against mortal and Cainite society morals, for they show weakness. This and everything else I have described to you regarding the Bahari is a basic overview of those who follow the path of Lilith and the road of Lilith that came before it, but you may be wondering, what place do Lilins have with the Sabbat, who are the main practitioners of the path of enlightenment? After all, the Sabbat Inquisition see this as hearsay, and the Sabbat are the sword of Cain, so Lilins don't really have a place there, surely. Well, to an extent, you're correct. Whilst Bahari exists within the Sabbat, I am told it is rather rare for witch hunts of this nature to occur within the sect. And there's certain sources of mine that tell me that there is a growing number of the Bahari within the Anarch movement also, but you believe what you will. If you have been paying attention to what I've been saying, the whole blend of supernatural creatures and mortals that don the title of Bahari can only apply under one sect, which is really a cult within itself. Yes, child. That is correct. Many Bahari cults do exist within the True Black Hand, the Tau-Mehe-Ra. Both Bahari and True Black Hand share very similar motives and ideologies, so it is highly likely that Lilin worship can be found under this elusive sect, as I am fairly certain I have mentioned before. I know two of these Bahari sects that exist beneath the Tau-Mehe-Ra umbrella. The Azikefra keep an uneasy peace between Nodist and Bahari factions within the True Black Hand. They were once considered to be bizarre, but they were recently taken a bit more seriously when they found ancient scriptures that would imply that Cain is the son of Lilith, not Adam and Eve, which conveniently fits their ideologies perfectly, that Lilith fulfilled both father and mother role to Cain, which would imply that his descendants are demons in another form. Conservative Bahari and Nodist within the Tau-Mehe-Ra still oppose each other and this idea, but it has allowed cooperation between these factions within the Tau-Mehe-Ra to work in relative harmony. The Red Midwives have a very different idea, for they want to tap into the vampiric frame to help vampires within the sect obtain their true power. Cain retaliated to Lilith's teachings with primitive defiance, so he only inherited a small portion of Lilith's powers, hissing and burning in the sun as a result. They cannot create their own children, but they can turn the descendants of Seth, who are always less than the Bahari. No mother should have those goals for their child. They should push them to equal heights at a minimum. The Red Midwives are far more sympathetic to the female condition, for lack of a better term, meaning they are not as spiteful, to put it nicely. They essentially wish to change and how to evolve as undead species. They wish to find a way to embrace without weakening the generation issue, and find a way for a fully fledged vampire to give birth as Lilith did, as the Finnbloods and Damphiers do. My sources tell me that they have managed to do this, the Red Midwives I mean. If this is true, and they truly found a way to do this, they would be unstoppable. That is assuming the Lilin witches don't get there first with their old faith magic and their unique necromancy path, the Nightshade path, but I will save that for another time. My constant mentioning of cults make the Bahari sound like some sort of secret cultic group that only the select few can join. Well, I suppose that is because they are, but that is not my point. You are not born into it, and it is rarely something you can find advertised that takes place at a local community centre, at least not as bluntly as that. All are equal before Lilith. It matters not whether you are a Tibetan monk or a devout Muslim. It is the pain, the suffering, the oath and gardening. These are what makes a Lilin. But there is one more thing that the Bahari believe and encourage. The return of Lilith on the night of Gehenna, after Cain has awakened, exacting revenge on him before taking revenge on God, and all others who have used and harmed and defiled her body, including Lucifer, depending on who you ask. The Bahari also believe that Lilith, the mother of monsters, the mother of demons, and the true mother of mortals, will ascend to heaven and claim it as her own, and if she does this, we are truly screwed, child. To be kept updated, follow the Lore by Night VTM Twitter and Instagram pages to find out when we will upload each episode. You can also find out by subscribing to the YouTube channel and clicking on the little bell, as you'll be immediately notified when the latest episode is live. Until next time, farewell.